Thou shalt not steal. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the thing which is good, that he may have to give to him that needeth.
We're looking at commandment number 8, thou shalt not steal. Now, what is the purpose of the 10 Commandments? The Bible tells us the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ, that we might be justified by faith. That's in Galatians. And as we begin, I must confess I am a thief. I was caught out at a very young age for being a thief. We were on a family visit a few miles north of where I was born, grew up, Charleville, County Cork, and we went to Doneraile, County Cork. My dad had a friend up there, just remembered, lived on the main street. Interesting little village, because at the top of the hill there was a great stately home, Doneraile Manor, I think it was called. And I think of it at this time of year because they had, as we have here locally, great numbers of daffodils. And you look in this enormous limestone pillared gate, and inside there was a vast number of daffodils. And I was probably 6 years old or 7 or something like that. And my 2 sisters and I, the big sisters, we went in there and started helping ourselves to the daffodils. Picking the daffodils, and I have to chuckle at this because the lady of the manor came out very annoyed, and I was too young to know what to do. My 2 sisters took off as fast as their legs could carry them, but I froze and I was caught caught as a thief. Now, I don't remember the outcome. I probably wasn't allowed to keep the daffodils, the fruit of my ill-begotten gains, but sticks in my mind, I'm a thief. I remember doing a Bible study with somebody who went through the 10 Commandments, and he insisted he had never broken any of the 10 Commandments. Well, the Bible insists we have broken them all, whether in deed or in heart or spirit. So, as you listen to these messages, you should be feeling a conviction in your soul, whether you're saved or not. Every single person should be feeling a little bit uncomfortable. Their conscience should be pricked, because these studies and the 10 Commandments should show us that we are sinners. We're in trouble. That's why we need a Savior. And on this Sunday of all Sundays, the time of year, we should be appreciative of the wonderful cleansing through the precious blood of Christ that flowed on Calvary. So, now you'll decide this doesn't apply to you, but we can break this commandment in all kinds of ways. So, we're going to have a look at some ways in which you can break this commandment. And sometimes stealing happens when you borrow something off another person. And I remember 1 or 2 of you have had this problem. I've had this a lot of times. I've loaned something to a neighbor or a friend, and it hasn't been returned, and some time passes, and when I ask for it back, they say, that's mine. Oh, that's my property, and I don't get it back. So we have to be careful. You have something lying around for a while, do you know what? You get used to it being there, and you begin to think it's yours. Wendy had this with a book. I remember she told me once she loaned to somebody, and not only did they hold on to it, but they had the audacity to write their name on it. And she was visiting their home and said, hey, that's my book. This happens all the time. Now, the Bible is very clear about property rights. Individuals have a right to own and keep what we call private property. Now, communism attacks this idea of private property. The abolition of private property is a central core of communism. And they have the idea of the collectivization of property. They hark on the fact that some people have more and other people have less, and they magnify grievances, and there's no doubt the sinful heart of man has produced some tremendous inequities. And so they say the answer is that we have collective ownership of everything. It's owned by everybody, and everything will be just lovely. The problem is when something is owned by everybody, nobody really takes care of it. And this has happened in the USSR, former USSR. That's broken up, but it's still manifest under Russia, whereby in years past they took land off landowners, collectivized it, and of course what happens is there's a drastic fall in food production and literally millions starved. Same thing happened in China, because if everyone owns something, it takes away the incentive and initiative to work. After all, you're going to receive the same reward whether you work hard or not. And so all this. But the Bible affirms the principle of private property. Now, Marxism, of course, is that very divisive 19th century political philosophy, a godless philosophy from a secular Jewish man called Karl Marx. And it divides society between the property owners and the workers. Marxism has hugely influenced the world to a very, very, very detrimental way, but it's still very much around today. It's taken on new forms, but anywhere where there's an attempt to divide people into two categories, the supposed oppressors and the supposed oppressed, that is Marxism. And of course, Marxism utilized the inequities produced by sinful men as justification for its policies. However, when Marxism takes power, it inevitably begins to oppress the very people it claims to represent. So you have the situation, the people's, what do they call it in China? The People's Army. And yet at Tiananmen Square, the People's Army shot and murdered thousands of their own people who simply wanted free speech and equity. So inevitably it turns to harassment and oppression, because of course you have a small number of people dominating the countless multitudes and millions. So the Bible, of course, tells us that Abraham was very greatly blessed of God materially. Genesis 24:1, Abraham was old, well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. According to Isaiah, God had blessed him and increased him. There's a lot of talk about slavery today. You know, slavery was endemic in the ancient world. In fact, it's endemic today. There are still forms of slavery going on. I have here in front of me a coin. I don't know why I keep it in front of me here, but it's, I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of hard to see on the screen. 1807. Of course, that is the year slavery was abolished in the UK. Now I'm looking, it's a £2 coin. I think I know the reason I get, well, maybe this is the one I can't remember. Is this the one I kept because I was told it was counterfeit? I can't remember, because I wouldn't know the difference because I'm not well up on UK coinage. But anyway, 1807, the abolition of slavery, but it hasn't really been abolished. But in ancient times, slavery was totally normal, expected. A victorious army conquers another. The people who are conquered, certainly cities who are conquered, those who survive, those who are too old to be of use, well, they were killed off. And anybody of value for work was sold into slavery or worse. So we go to Genesis, just for interest, go to Genesis 37 and verse 27. Okay? Now, this is a situation here, the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Jacob, and Joseph being the favorite, they were very jealous of him, and they decided, first of all, they were going to kill him, and then Reuben, I think, was very much against that. Of course, he wanted to rescue him, and he had a little plot to rescue him. So he said, well, why don't we just sell him into slavery? Well, he didn't suggest that, but he wanted them to be left alive anyway. So he was sold into slavery. Come, let us sell him. That's Joseph to the Ishmaelites. Ishmaelites have always been big into slavery, even unto fairly modern times. We had a situation here. There's an interesting book about Baltimore, I think it is, yes, in County Cork. And about 200 years ago, people were awakened in the middle of the night to a raid from North Africa. Arabs came in and carried away the entire town or village as slaves. In fact, it's not very well known, but several million white people were carried away as slaves by the Arabs. Like I said, and this is in more modern times. If you know a bit of history, that is one reason why one of the past presidents of the United States actually possessed a Koran, because he wanted to understand what was going on with him, with the North Africans taking American citizens as slaves. That's the background. Fascinating history. So throughout much of history, the buying and selling of people as merchandise was normal. Later on, Joseph said in a testimony, he said, "For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews," ended up in prison, of course, falsely accused. So the kidnapping of people and putting them into slavery in the Old Testament was punishable by death. Exodus chapter 21 and verse 16. So let's have a look at that. Exodus 21 verse 16. And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. It is a most heinous practice. It's also in Deuteronomy. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of them, or selleth him, then that thief shall die. So it's thieving. So that's kind of a different perspective on theft as well. And thou shalt put away evil away from among you. It's heinous evil. It's also mentioned in the New Testament, 1 Timothy 1:10. Knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless and disobedient, to convict them of sin, for the ungodly and for sinners, for unholy and profane, for murderers and of fathers, murderers of murderers, for manslayers, for whoremongers, them that defile themselves with mankind, for men stealers, kidnappers, people who steal people, put them into slavery. That's going on in Ireland today. There are cases of it happening all over the Western world. It's happening in America. A young lady somewhere in a third world country responds to an advert to become a childminder to a rich family in the West. When she arrives, her passport is taken away. She finds she's expected to do a very different kind of work. It's not work at all, with little or no pay. That's called people trafficking. Cases have turned up here in Ireland. And it's incontrovertible. Vast numbers of people are working as slaves in China today. In fact, you could say most of the populace are in some form of slavery. They don't have a thing called free collective bargaining. They can't bargain for their labor. But there are vast numbers of people in concentration camps working for nothing as slaves. And, it's a thought. We like to go to Lidl and Aldi and get our stuff. They've got great stuff. How do they do such low prices? Well, maybe some of it's based on slavery. And it's not limited to China either. So slavery is everywhere. And we should be pushing our politicians to, as several countries have enacted legislation, including the U.S., that they will not accept products from areas of China that they believe slavery is going on. I think it should be extended to the entirety of China until they stop slavery and it's verifiable. I don't think we should be doing business with them. And they do even worse. They steal people's organs for transplants. If you need a liver or a kidney transplant in any Western country, say a big one in the United States, you can be waiting years for a match. In China, they can put you down in 2 weeks. How is that possible? Well, they take samples from these people held in these concentration camps, and somebody applies for a transplant. They're even doing, I believe, what do they call it? Halal transplants. So you get a transplant from a Muslim person. Not funny at all. It's terrible. It's wicked. So certainly wealth is a considerable snare. And you know what? God cannot entrust many of us with it. 1 Timothy 6:9, they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. And sometimes people come into wealth by dishonest means. Now, biblically, there is a biblical method of gaining property. What is it? Well, it's mentioned in Genesis 3. It's part of the curse. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread till thou return unto the ground, for out of it thou wast taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. Genesis 3:19. There's an interesting verse in Ephesians 4:28. Have a look. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the thing that is good, that he may have to give to him that needeth. So the advice here to a thief is stop stealing. How do you provide? How am I going to live if I can't steal? Well, labor. Put in an honest day's work, working with his hands, whether it's wielding a spade or wielding a keyboard, but working with your hands that which is good. And not only do you have to provide for yourself, but you have ability to provide to those in need. 1 Thessalonians 5:7 tells us, if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. So neglecting to provide for parents. Now remember, in Bible times, there was no social welfare net, safety net. People literally starved and had very tough times. I still remember the time Patty and I visited Bulgaria. Heartbreaking. Hope things have improved, but they were probably one of the worst countries in Europe. Terrible, hard conditions, heartbreaking situation. So if you do prosper as a result of hard work and diligence and providence, God's provision, don't allow them to dominate your heart. Psalm 62:10, if riches increase, set not your heart upon them. Everything comes from God. He seeks to protect the property rights in this commandment. Now, there are other areas of stealing. You can steal from your employer. In fact, there's approximately a third of all employees steal from their employer. Oh, an odd bit from work. Well, you should seek permission if there's something you fancy. Of course, if it's in a skip, a dumpster, okay. It's always good to ask as well. But when it's in a dumpster, it's implied they're getting rid of it. You're actually saving the money now because it costs money to get rid of stuff. But there's a lot of stealing from employers. You can steal time. I remember there was a situation up at the Riversdale School. Not going to name anybody, but there was a security man there a long time ago before they got the current security system. And I noticed he was always on the telephone. And apparently he had a friend in Australia, I think it was. Anyway, some foreign country. And he ran up a very large phone bill. Well, that was stealing. And of course, you can't get away with that because there's such thing as a phone bill, a record. Who's making these calls? There's nobody in the school. What's going on here? I think he got the bullet. Got the chop. Got fired, I think. But anyway, people steal from their workplaces, in retail industry. People steal stuff in shops. I mean, it's unbelievable. Dishonesties everywhere. We had a situation came out recently with a major financial company here in Dublin, and all kinds of skullduggery, sophisticated theft. So, all kinds of things. I remember years ago I was working in England, and there were times when I needed to make a phone call. We didn't have mobile phones. They're a modern invention, and I wanted to pay, and I kept the list, and you've got to keep a list, and in the end they wouldn't let me pay because it embarrassed the others so much who were making calls and who weren't paying. Romans 13 verse 7, render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. This is to do with taxes, debts. All bills are to be honored. The Bible says the laborer is worthy of his hire. You get someone to do some work for you, you should pay him. You should pay him properly. And also tribute is tax or tolls, various types of taxes. We should pay legitimate taxes. It doesn't preclude using legitimate tax deductibles. And the way they're throwing it around like confetti, I kind of begrudge unnecessarily giving the taxman money because they're really not looking after it terribly well. Oh, it's unbelievable. So, well, there's a big thing about the TV license. Well, we got rid of TV a long time ago. We were ahead of the posse. Don't miss it. But now they want to tax us for using the internet. Well, I don't see why I should pay for something I don't use. It's called the consumer pays principle. So I don't pay TV license, but those who have a TV should, unless you're in a country where it's not required. Honor to whom honor. So it's taking care of other people's property as well and teaching that to our children. We loan somebody something and it gets damaged. What do they do? Do they replace it, or do they just quietly look the other way and pretend it didn't happen and walk away? No, if you borrow something, you're taking on board the responsibility of returning that safely in good working order, or if it gets lost or damaged or whatever in your care, you're responsible to replace it. So that's sometimes I don't borrow stuff because I can't afford to replace this thing. It's expensive. You can steal a person's good name through your tongue. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. Proverbs 22:1. Whoso privily slandereth his neighbor, him will I cut off. Psalm 101:5. Proverbs 6. These things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift to running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies. Notice lies are in twice. And he that soweth discord among brethren. In the Old Testament, there were penalties for stealing. Exodus 22:1. If a man steal an ox or a sheep and kill it and sell it, he shall restore 5 oxen for a sheep and 4 sheep for a sheep. Oxen being a lot more valuable, there's a higher penalty apparently. Well, rather than having people in prison, it cost, figures years ago where they've gone up since, they said it costs $100,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. That's a lot of money. It'd almost be better to give them the money and say, look, promise to be good and we'll give you lots of money. I mean, I'm not proposing that, but if people had to work and pay back, so maybe if they were in a prison work situation where they had to put in working hours and they worked off the cost of what they stole, or at least a proportion of it. Sometimes, of course, people destroy through arson or whatever property worth millions their entire lifetime. They wouldn't be able to pay it back. But I think it's a good principle. It's a Bible principle. And a lot of times, organizations get letters with money in. The olden days, it used to be a check. Don't know how they're going to manage in the future, but people have consciences because of things they've taken that are not theirs. And there was a famous case there recently. I think it was something stolen from a museum, and it was like 40 years ago, and it got sent back to a museum in the UK. Somebody's conscience was bothering them. The trouble is, if you steal something, you can't really enjoy it because you can't show it off and say, oh, look at this wonderful thing here. Well, where did that come from? How'd you get that? It's kind of embarrassing. They say that there are people who have stuff stolen to order, artwork. The trouble is they have to hide it somewhere in their mansion in a locked room, and only they can enjoy it because they can't show it off. The only people that could show it off to are other thieves. And hopefully they'll keep their mouth shut. You know what I'm saying? You just can't enjoy it. The Bible tells us that we are to owe no man anything but to love one another. Thou shalt not steal. We're not to take from other people. We're to respect their property. And other people, we have a right that they would respect ours. And most people are pretty honest. Wendy had a situation happen recently. She lost her phone. It was in her pocket. We're going for a walk, and a very nice lady and her sons found it. Now, when that happens, a lot of times people just say, well, finders keepers, losers weepers, and they go and get it unlocked and they could sell it. Their phones are quite valuable, very valuable these days. And what's the right thing to do? Well, obviously she was able to trace us. She went to great trouble, actually, to trace Wendy. And we got a phone call, and it was returned. Very, very kind lady. But most people don't go to that much trouble. Quite a few times we have taken stuff to the Garda station when we found stuff. A few times, I think I can remember 3 times now. And one time the person claimed it. Second time they didn't. It was cash found down in County Kilkenny many years ago. Lydia, with her eagle eye, spotted it a long time ago. And the law is after 366 days, if it's not claimed, the finder is the legal owner thereafter. And in that case, we phoned up on day 366, hadn't been claimed, went down, got the money, and it was in something else, and whatever. But we made a decent attempt to return it. So honesty is the best policy, and Christians should be trustworthy. Somebody should be able to literally give you a suitcase of money. Of course, why would they be doing that? Well, not very good, but somebody should literally be able to give something to you and know they can trust you to look after it, because if they can't trust us, they can't trust anybody.